Good morning, everybody. Been a while since I've done one of these. Um, it's sunrise. I haven't done one of these in a while, not because nobody watches them, but just because um, I've kind of struggled a lot lately with my own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Look at this tree. See, sometimes we do immeasurable damage to people that we don't even realize in the process of thinking we're doing what's right. Um, there's a saying on the wall here that says, do we want to be right or do we want to be happy? And I take it one step further at this point. Whether you're right or you're happy, knowing that sometimes nothing is what our mind makes it out to be is a realization that we have to come to. We may think that we're right, we may think that we're happy, but if we refuse to let something go and we refuse to acknowledge what's wrong, then we're not doing anybody any good. Not ourselves, not anyone else. Because our brain is set up to process information on this very logical train of thought. If this, then this equals this. And while that works with a lot of things, it does not work very well in conjunction with emotion. There's a sheet that we do here called the wise mind. It's when you take your reasonable thought process and you compare it to your emotional thought process, and you come out with what's considered the wise mind. So, for instance, if my reasonable state of mind is, I know the grass is green, I know that the tree trunks are brown, that's a reasonable assertion of my surroundings. But if my emotional state steps in and goes, grass is blue, trees, they're purple, doesn't seem to make sense because we already know color schemes. So how could the grass be blue and why would a tree be purple? But that's how our emotions process things. It's how our emotional state processes things. So what we have to do is we have to combine the logic or the reason with the emotion. Combine the left brain and right brain efforts to come up with our wise mind solution. I understand that you believe the grass is blue because that's your perception of it. But the reality is the grass is green. You've identified the emotional state that you are in by saying, I acknowledge your perception. However, the facts of the matter are this. It's green. We have a color spectrum. Based on that color spectrum, it's green. When you apply that logic and that emotional state and you combine it into the wise mind, you're able to work through a lot of things that you didn't even think you could. Try it. the next time that you have an irrational or intrusive thought, try it. Look at it from a completely purely subjective state of mind. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Look at it from a completely subjective state of mind. If it helps to write it down, do it. Because chances are you may have to come back to it. You may come back to the same thought later. It may recur. It's not going to be any more right than it was last time. But if it does recur, at least you have it written down and you have the train of thought to process through again. Then look at it from a completely objective standpoint. Use that reasonable mind, that rational thought process to go, well, you may feel that way, and you're right in being emotional about whatever it is. But if you take a step back from it and you view it from a detached, rational perspective, here's what I'm seeing. My suggestion is to write down the emotional thought first and then walk away. Write out whatever it is that you're feeling emotionally and then walk away. This will give your brain time to come. You've now gotten the thought out, the irrational thought out, or what you may perceive as a rational thought at the time. But when you come back to it later, you can look at it and go, I may have felt that way at the time based on this, and this. But now that I'm looking at it from a rational perspective, let me write that down. So you write down the rational thought, and then you come back. Step away from it, and then come back. Because again, the goal in doing this is to realize that your brain is at war sometimes. So if you try to process the equation on a purely rational basis, you're probably just going to echo the rational response. Whereas your emotional response initially will go completely unregarded. And the same way the other way around. If you try to process the emotional and the rational at the same time, it's still going to come out irrational because you haven't given your brain time to process the thought. So you come back at the end. Let's say I write down my emotional thought first thing in the morning, right? So I write it all down, and then I come back at lunchtime and I read through it. If I can't process it rationally, I don't write anything else down. I don't try and argue with myself. I don't give it any thought. I just leave it as is because I'm not ready to process it yet. So I come back at dinner and I look at it and I go, maybe you watched a YouTube video that helped you center your thought process. Maybe, you did some soul searching and you realized that you were coming at it from an emotional state because that's how you process. Maybe you don't have the maturity or the wisdom yet to differentiate. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why it's very difficult for us. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Sorry for headphone listeners. What I'm saying is, take the time to evaluate the emotional state that you are in. Figure out what has caused that emotional state. Because until then, you won't be able to give it rational thought. It simply won't work. And the reason being is because whether it's maturity or honesty or, rational thought in general, there are people who, unfortunately, live in their emotional state, period. When they rely on their emotional state their entire life, it leads them into a life of being a victim. They're a victim to their circumstance. They're a victim to their own reality. Everything is everyone else's fault, so of course the perspective isn't going to change, because there's no need to change their perspective. It's not their fault. It's somebody else's. When you can get past yourself and get out of your own way and really come to realize, hey, I'm part of the problem, then it's going to change. But until then, you're not going to be able to formulate that rational thought. Check this out. This is why I come out this early in the morning. Once you've processed the emotional and the rational mindsets, and you can look at it and see both perspectives, both sides of it, only then are you able to come to a true, genuine, wise mind conclusion. If I'm upset emotionally because somebody doesn't like me, but the reality or the rational part of the solution is the reason that person doesn't like me is because I said something that offended them, then the wise mind comes to the conclusion that I may be emotionally reacting to the way someone feels based on the fact that I offended them in the first place. And so my solution to that would be then to either apologize to that person if I can, acknowledge the wrong that I've done on my part, or just accept the fact that person is not going to like me based on the events that transpired. And there's not going to be anything that I can do to change that. But the key to all of it at that point is to accept that I'm not going to be able to change the past. I'm not going to be able to rectify the situation necessarily with the other person. And even if I don't get an answer, or I don't get the answer I want, it doesn't mean that I'm right, doesn't mean that I'm happy. It means that I have come to the reality and the realization that I don't have to be either in order to radically accept the situation that I'm in. And by radically accepting the situation that I'm in, I can then go, okay, if you hurt people's feelings, they don't want to be around you. And if people don't want to be around you, it's a painful lesson, but it's a learning moment. What can I do differently next time to avoid that? Maybe this person won't speak to me, so do I hold on to that one specific person? Or do I use it as a life lesson to go, okay, I messed up with this person. How can I prevent that from happening in the future? Once we figure out how to prevent that from happening in the future, then we can be happy. Then it doesn't matter whether we're right or wrong. What matters is that we have learned. We have made progress, and we are successfully able to carry on. And that one painful lesson may turn into a lifetime of learning. And that's all the more we can ask. I just ask you to think about that. Enjoy the sunrise.